Let's talk about how to set up your RTW device for a correct loudness measurement. Picking the correct loudness measurement really starts by knowing the loudness standard or the delivery specifications that you need to be compliant with. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of delivery specifications, and there's a lot of broadcast compliance requirements and all kind of stuff that you probably need to be aware of. We have made a blog page where we kind of have an overview of the different delivery specifications around the world. We try to keep this page updated. What it's basically about is worldwide loudness delivery standards. Could also say delivery requirements. And if I just scroll down here, you can see that we cover a lot of stuff here. Different countries, different organizations, Amazon, Apple, Disney, Spotify, Netflix, Tidal, YouTube. Different countries here in Europe, Germany, United States, all of it. It's a really comprehensive page here. And for each of these sections, you can see what the specifications are. Let's go for Norway here. You can see that they use the EBU R128 minus 23. And then this one says, okay, for live contents, there's a tolerance of plus minus 1 LU, okay. Maximum loudness range is 18, and true peak max is minus 3 dB. So that's for each of the sections that we have a section like that. But once you know that, it's of course important that you set up your loudness measurement to comply to this standard. So let's just go into the editor and let's really quickly just set up just an example here. I'll just call it loudness like this. And I pick metering and I pick stereo and ppm. For true peak, I just pick the true peak 60 scale. And here is the important step. You can always change this selection once you've built your preset, but this is basically where you set the loudness type. I'll just go for EBU R128 from now. Doesn't matter, we're gonna look at it later anyway. I press finish. I make sure I set up my routing just so I can get some audio into my device, and I go to metering. I could go into the view and just add an instrument. I can add an instrument here just for the sake, but it's really not the view that this video is about. It's more about the settings. So to get into the loudness settings, you would go to the application level here and you press edit, and then you press loudness, and here's the loudness settings. One thing to understand is that the settings that we show here are depending on the loudness type that you have selected over here. So in the case where I have selected the loudness type being EBU R128, there are some settings available. If I go for SPL, there are other settings available. If I go for my Netflix preset, there are actually more settings. Okay. If I go to custom, I have other settings. So the amount of settings or amount of parameters that you can tweak is depending on the loudness type that you have selected over here. The reason to have a loudness type for us is to actually make it easier for you. So if I know from my blog page here that I'm in the EBU, for instance, down here, if the standard says EBU R128, then I know that I need to pick this one. And as you can see here, when I pick the EBU R128, some of the parameters are grayed out. That could be the integration time. It is set to 400 milliseconds, and so the momentary integration time is set to 400 milliseconds. The short term is set to 3 seconds, and it's grayed out because that's part of the standard. If you change this, you don't comply to the standard anymore. The same about the gate. There's an absolute gate with minus 70 threshold, and then there's the relative gate of minus 10 LU. These are also not changeable if you have selected EBU R128. If I go to custom, I can do whatever I want. The same if I go to the calm, you can see the same principle basically. It's the same settings here that are grayed out. The weighting filter is set to K filter, and that's also not changeable because that's part of the standard. Again, if I go to custom, or if I go to TASA, for instance, or LAQ, I can actually set my weighting filter. But it doesn't make sense to be able to set your weighting filter if you select the EBU standard, because that's part of the standard. So first thing is that you select the correct loudness type. Once you've done that, you're actually set up quite okay. The next one is the scale, and that is also something that can differ depending on what loudness type you have selected. If I go for R128, I have some EBU scales here, +9, +3, +18, and that's simply the range of the scale. One super important part to note is the A that we have here. The A stands for absolute. Okay, if you select EBU +9, it shows you basically the relative scale in LU. If I select EBU +9A for absolute, it shows me the absolute scale. So with the relative scale, if I set it to -23 for target level, then the 0 on the scale would be -23. If I then go absolute, the 0 is not 0 anymore, it's now -23, right? So this is about showing in LU or showing in LUFS here. So that's the absolute. That's quite an important part to say. You can set the target level here. The target level, it's almost always, or if not always, -23 LUFS. If I look at these specifications, if the loudness standard is R128, then the integrated target value is -23. There can be different things, so we have opened that up for so that it can be set. But really, there could also be arguments for saying, no, you can't set the target level because it's practically always -23 if you are R128. If you go for the calm, it's -24 LKFS, and basically the same thing. If you go for calm, it's almost always the same. Almost always -24. Again, with EBU R128, integration time and integration gate, we cannot change those. Then we have the tolerances, and the tolerances are basically shown in our meters by typically have another color in that area. For the integration tolerance, for instance, I can go to my standard here and I can say, what is the tolerance here for advertisement spots in Germany? It's actually 0. So let's just go for another one here. We had another one over here where it is here, for instance, general TV broadcast ± LU for live, plus minus 0.2 for quality control. So as you can see, there are different settings here. Advertisement, it's plus minus 0.5. And here in my example here, I have set it to plus minus 0.5. But if I want to go plus minus 1, I just go minus 1 to plus 1. Now the tolerance is plus minus 1. And there's a tolerance for both integrated, for short term, and for momentary. So all these three measurements can have different tolerances in our meters. Next parameter up is the trigger settings. The trigger settings basically let you automatically start and stop your loudness measurement, so you don't need to start and stop manually all the time. Start. First option, auto start at preset. That means when you load a preset, the measurement is automatically started. Manual. With manual, you do need to press the start button to start it. Auto start gate. It's basically a gate here that you set. I can set it to say minus 70 LOVs in this case. And that means that when the audio program is more than minus 70 LOVs, then loudness measurement automatically starts. There's another one here, it's quite good. Auto start with a reset. You have it here. So that means that when the audio is louder than minus 70, the loudness measurement is reset and then started. Right? So you don't need to reset it between measurements. Stop, basically same thing. Manual, you need to press stop to stop it. Auto stop gate means that you set a gate, could be whatever, minus 74. When the audio is below minus 74, the loudness measurements automatically stops. The last one is the auto stop gate with time. That means that when the audio is below minus 74 LOVs, it doesn't quite stop yet. It waits for a period of time, say 8 seconds, and then after the 8 seconds, and it stops. So that should be quite cool. Last thing here is the weightings. So the weightings, not so interesting for a stereo, perhaps more interesting if we look at a surround or even an Atmos. In here, they're grayed out. That means you cannot change them. That means it's because it's part of the R128 standard. Some of the presets, if you select the loudness type custom, for instance, then you can go in and then you can edit the weightings. But with a lot of the loudness types here, they're actually locked because the weighting is part of the standard, so no reason to edit those. So this is the EBU R128 parameters here. We also have those for COM, practically the same ones. But it really changes. If you go SPL, you have different settings here. If you go Dialog Gated, that's actually the page where you get most settings. You have the integration time and integrated gate settings here, as you saw before. But we also have a Dialog Gated section here. And as you might know, Dialog Gated measurement is about only measuring the sections in your program material where there's dialogue. So there's a dialogue detector that says, okay, is there dialogue, is there not dialogue? And if there's dialogue, the measurement starts. If there's no dialogue, the measurement stops. This is the quick and dirty explanation of that. Typically, you will then set a lower target level compared to the you could say the normal loudness measurement, and you can also set other thresholds, actually absolute and relative. This threshold is basically about the amount of dialogue in your program material. Okay, if you have a movie and you measure that, the algorithm finds out how big a percentage of the entire program that contains dialogue. The thinking here is that if there's not enough dialogue, then it doesn't make sense to base your loudness measurement on dialogue. So there needs to be a certain amount of dialogue in your program material before it makes sense to use dialog gated measurements. Kind of makes sense. Since we set it here to 15%, in the meter on the view page, you can see what that percentage is, because the dialog detector reports to the percentage indicator on the UI what it actually is. You can also set which channels. Here in the left-right setup, it's perhaps not so interesting, but if you have surround setup or an Atmos setup, you might want to specify exactly which channels do you expect to be to include dialogue. Beside that, as we talked about before with regards to the tolerance that you can set, and again, the tolerance is basically makes an indication on the meter, so you can give the tolerance area a certain color. In the dialog loudness type here, we have actually dialog tolerances also that can be different to the other tolerances. So it's quite a lot of numbers here, but the point is really you can have different tolerance settings for your different types of measurements. One for normal loudness and one for dialog gated loudness. So you have here momentary dialog low, momentary dialog high, short-term dialog low, short-term dialog high, integrated dialog low, integrated dialog high, and all that can be set, as you see, independent. In the loudness type, in the dialog gated loudness type, we of course also have the trigger settings here and the settings. As with the other examples, if you go for another preset, then certain parameters are grayed out. If I go for the Netflix loudness type here, the integration time is grayed out, the gate is grayed out. Also, in the dialog gated section, the threshold for absolute and relative gates are basically grayed out because they're part of the Netflix delivery standard or delivery specifications. So makes no sense that you're able to tweak them. All these standards, all these parameters and stuff like that, because there's so many of them. First time you see it, it can be really overwhelming. But if you look at the loudness block here and look how many different specifications there actually is around the world, then it does really make sense to include everything. So every parameter that you see here on any international loudness specification, any setting that are specified anywhere in the world can be set in your RTW meter. So the loudness parameters was part of the application. So application is here. I press the application, I go edit, and here I have my loudness parameters. There is another thing. If I go in here, you can see that I have here ppm meter available. I have my loudness numbers. That's my MSI bar, momentary, short-term, and integrated. I have my loudness numbers. And I also have my gate. Okay, one really important thing to understand here is that the amount of instruments that I have in my view, that I have available for my view, is depending on the loudness type. Let's see, if I go for the Netflix, I go back and into the view here, hey, you can see that I have more settings here. I have the MSI bar here, but with dialog numbers. Okay, so it's momentary dialog, short-term dialog, integrated dialog that I have here. Okay, so I have those available because now the loudness type is set to dialog, so it makes sense for them to be there. I actually also have a dialog detector. The dialog detector will light up green when the algorithm detects dialog. And actually I can build, if I want, probably a bit stupid, but I can build one gigantic dialog detector on that takes up the entire screen of my meter. Of course I don't want to do that. Just put it down here. I can actually also put it in the menu bar if I want that, and I make it bigger here. Yeah, the important part to understand is that if you have selected a loudness type, a certain loudness type, then actually the selection of instruments that you have here in the view can differ. But also actually inside the instruments there can be differences. So here you can see, if I go in my loudness numeric display, you can see that I have a lot of numbers available. Let's just take all of them. So this is all I have available. And you can see that I have the dialog numbers here also, the short-term dialog, integrated dialog, LIA dialog, and the dialog percentage that we talked about before. Okay. If my loudness type is not a dialog gated loudness type, then I of course do not have these numbers available. Now I do know all these numbers can be overwhelming, and you would probably only need 1, 2, or 3 of them in your daily work. So this is just for demonstration. I would normally go in here and say, no, I don't need all that. I would probably just need my integrated and my time. Perhaps I might integrate a dialog and my integrated. Then I have it here, and then I can make it a little smaller like this. So again, a lot of settings that depend on other settings, and that's hopefully now more clear and more understandable, that there are stuff you can do if you have selected a certain loudness type, and other stuff you can do if you've selected another loudness type. Yeah, so hopefully this shed a little light on all this loudness stuff. Make sure to visit our Loudness blog here in case you want to delve into loudness standards. Also know that we often have a lot of references here. So Apple, for instance, here I can go into here, and we have a link to Apple's specifications here. This is not only just a collection of loudness standards and settings, it's actually also links to the real original documentation of those. So quite a nice page there. So yeah, that's loudness. Have fun.